Good evening, everyone, again. On behalf of the Mississippi Center for Justice, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this year's Mississippi on the Potomac reception. I am Deborah Brown, here from Jackson, Mississippi, and it is my distinct honor to serve as chair of the board of directors of the center. We always enjoy gathering here in our nation's capital for this event, and this year is particularly special. It is special because this year the center is celebrating 10 years of work to advance racial and economic justice in Mississippi. Isn't that a wonderful thing? 10 years. We here tonight mark 10 years of gathering together with our friends in the D.C. area, friends who make the center's work in Mississippi relevant and important outside of our home state. Now, in years past, you have joined us to support our campaigns to make access to justice possible for thousands of hardworking Mississippians. These Mississippians are those who need help recovering from disasters, who want and deserve quality education for themselves and their children, who need help keeping their homes and not being victims of foreclosure, and who strive for something better than predatory lending as a way of accessing financial services. While we celebrate small victories in these areas and more, tonight we will present a new campaign designed to combat the kind of predatory lending that threatens to destroy the dreams of too many Mississippians who seek financial independence. As you'll hear in a few moments, it is an ambitious campaign, one unlike anything we've done before, and one that we hope will continue to make you proud of the work that the center does and our team. So we very much appreciate your presence here tonight. We extend a special thanks to you for your financial support and the volunteering of your time. It really means so much to us, and we are forever, forever grateful. We look forward more than anything to the next 10 years with your support helping us accomplish the things that we know that you have faith and commitment to us in pursuing. So again, welcome, and thank you so very much for joining us tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. I say it again, that was a little... Good evening. I'm Phaedra Robinson, and I serve as the Director of Consumer Protection at the Mississippi Center for Justice. From foreclosure prevention to reforming for-profit colleges and universities to creating opportunities for fair lending, consumer protection is exactly what's needed in Mississippi. While payday lending is a national problem, it has caused particular damage in Mississippi, the state with the highest per capita concentration of payday lending stores than any other state in this country. So the issue of predatory lending is one that's very personal for me. See, I hail from a single-parent family, and quite often when my mother couldn't make ends meet, she relied on small loan companies to address those budget shortfalls. And as you all know, the small loan companies are the grandfathers to payday lending. And we've heard the pitches, we know the tunes, we've seen the advertisement where the guys say, you know, it's quick and easy to get cash in a flash. But they're really set up to profit for themselves without regard for the collateral damage done to low-income communities of color. So after working on this issue for the past decade, the center felt that we needed to supply resources, information, and access to credit for these cash-strapped families. So our new approach is based on a public-private partnership backed by the Clinton Global Initiative. Together, we will offer fair lending and fair credit options to Mississippians right where they are, in the workplace, where they can take full advantage of financial education programs and banking products that will improve their financial situation as opposed to getting them mired in a cycle of debt that they cannot rebound from. We are so encouraged by the responses we've received from local banks and employers across the state. And as you'll see in just a moment, one of the state's largest employers already has a successful model available to its employees. And at the center, we're starting our first partnership in the heart of the Mississippi Delta with the Greenville Public School District, a district that has over 800 employees. And they are often the prime targets of predatory lenders. We believe we can change the story of predatory lending in Mississippi. We believe that the New Roots Credit Partnership will help people make it to their next payday.
Good evening. Good evening, John. I'm Martha Bergmark, and I'm very privileged to be the founding president of the Mississippi Center for Justice. Thank you for joining us this evening, and it's wonderful to see so many friends, both old and new, as we honor Judge James Robertson and celebrate our 10th anniversary and the launch of the New Roots Credit Partnership. You know, the Center's best days are ahead of us, but I ask for your indulgence while I reflect for just a moment on the history we've had so far. I think back to those early days in Jackson in the little house on North Congress Street. We held our ribbon cutting there on June 12, 2003, the 40th anniversary of Medgar Evers' murder, and we dedicated ourselves to the unfinished business of his heroic mission. It is safe to say that few of our friends could have imagined that we would be here and be where we are 10 years later. Most importantly, that we could become one of our state's, and indeed our nation's, most effective social change organizations. Today, with a budget of $4 million and a staff of 35 professionals working in 3 offices across the state, the Center is a powerful force for change. It's a key advocate, broker, convener, and communicator in statewide policy campaigns to increase access to health care, education, affordable housing, and economic security for low-income families and communities of color. Just consider that what has been accomplished in just the past 3 years of our history. A landmark settlement with HUD that directed $172 million to 6,000 Katrina-damaged households and put an end to the state's callous attempt to exclude low-income, primarily African-American residents from the benefits of Hurricane Katrina recovery programs. Development and implementation of a 4-state program to provide free legal services to low-income victims of the BP oil disaster. To date, this program has provided services to more than 10,000 claimants for lost wages and income. Our collective experiences with Katrina and BP have led us to develop a highly regarded first response team whose hands-on legal assistance has provided services across the Gulf Coast states and more recently in New Jersey and New York in the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy. A statewide legal services program that fields 6 full-time attorneys to provide representation to homeowners in mortgage foreclosure matters as a result of the National Mortgage Foreclosure Settlement. After years of dreaming and planning, we opened an office in the Mississippi Delta that's working to improve the quality of the region's failing public schools and expanding health care to its poorest residents. Settlement of federal litigation that restored housing rights to several hundred poverty-level residents of the Delta who were subjected to deplorable housing conditions as a result of the illegal actions of a corrupt public housing director. And just last month, through an exciting partnership with the University of Mississippi Medical Center, the Mississippi Department of Health, and others, the Center has established the first ever medical legal partnership in Mississippi. I know this is happening around the country, but we're with the program now. And it's focused on providing legal assistance to people living with HIV/AIDS. So it was a particular challenge to establish that kind of partnership for that reason. While we're proud of our accomplishments, we are reminded every day of the human suffering that continues to plague our state and our responsibility to combat that suffering. And that's why we're so excited about New Roots Credit Partnership. It's going to enable tens of thousands of Mississippians to enter the economic mainstream. But you know, the campaign actually also represents a turning point in our thinking about what it takes to produce lasting change. As you know, Mississippi is a very conservative state. The policy environment is generally inhospitable to our issues. The Center's 10-year struggle for enforcement of civil rights laws and for government programs and services to meet human needs cuts against the grain of a defiantly unreconstructed swath of our citizenry. But New Roots is different. We're not fighting the political establishment. We're not seeking government help. The campaign has no enemy. Instead, we're mobilizing banks, credit unions, businesses big and small, municipalities, and the faith-based community to stand with us and create a service that will do good for the community and our partners' bottom line through increased profits and worker productivity. The model is at an early stage of development, and it doesn't mean we're abandoning our other tools in our toolbox of advocacy, but it holds out the hope of creating alliances that can be a force for good in other contexts and begin to reshape the political culture of Mississippi and other states across the country. But you know, as gratified as we may feel about how far we've come in the past 10 years, we are also well aware that, like Isaac Newton, if we have seen farther, it's because we stand on the shoulders of giants. And tonight we honor one such giant. So with that, let me turn the program over to our wonderful board member, Washington luminary, and best of all, my good friend, Judith Lichtman.
I don't think anybody's ever called me a luminary before. So, here's the story. Elliot and I first met Jim and Barrett in March of 1969, over 44 years ago. We had just returned from Mississippi in November of '68, where Elliot had been a staff attorney with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights in their Jackson office. Elliot received a call from a much-beloved partner at Wilmer, Cutler, and Pickering, Lou Oberdorfer. Lou was the Lawyers Committee co-chair that year and got it in his head that this young attorney in the firm needed to go to Mississippi to become the staff director of the Jackson office. Jim and his wife, Barrett, had a young family, and while the work was important, exciting, and God knows fun, they seemed a little reluctant to uproot their family and transplant their young children to a somewhat hostile cultural environment. As Lou laid out our job, it was to accompany Jim and Barrett to Mississippi and convince them that living in Jackson was entirely doable, important, safe, and fun. We must have been a smash success because the Robertsons did indeed decide to move to Jackson for the Lawyers Committee's leadership role, and the rest is history. Elliot and I have been blessed to get to know Jim over these many decades. He is a man of remarkable talent, a first-rate legal mind, superb judgment, and a deep commitment to social justice. Jim graduated from GW Law School in '65, entered private practice at Wilmer, and at the time, Wilmer was just a tiny firm. Nevertheless, his colleague David Chambers says that somehow Wilmer managed to find an office for them 4 floors away from everybody else that they had named Siberia. As Jim recalled, Jim loved the firm, he loved to strategize, he loved the law. His devotion to Wilmer notwithstanding, as I suggested a minute ago, the civil rights battles that were being fought on the streets of Montgomery, Selma, and Jackson drew him to that Lawyers Committee leadership job. Jim says his years in Jackson became a defining period in his life. In Mississippi, Jim participated in or oversaw matters that were critical to the civil rights struggle: litigation to equalize municipal services in communities of color, litigation to declare unlawful charitable tax deductions to segregated academies, challenges to the underrepresentation of African Americans on the Safe Streets Act Planning Agency, their exclusion from membership on the selective service panels, and so much more. But perhaps the most notable case during Jim's tenure was the NAACP versus Clybourne Hardware. Charles Evers, Medgar's brother, returned from Chicago to Clarksdale, Mississippi to continue his fight following Medgar's death. In '68, Charles, then the Mississippi Field Secretary of the NAA, led a boycott against Clybourne and other merchants, during which he used fiery language to, quote unquote, strongly urge customers not to break the boycott. 17 merchants, including Clybourne, sued the NAA and others to recover losses caused by the boycott. The case was tried beginning in '73, and a verdict was issued in '76, which awarded Clybourne Hardware and others a judgment of $1.25 million, a judgment that was large enough to shake the very foundation of the NAA. The decision was upheld by the Supreme Court of Mississippi and appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. By that time, Jim was back at Wilmer. The Lawyers Committee asked the firm to take the case, and they agreed. Jim played a critical role in its preparation. He used the case to mentor young lawyers and to inculcate in them the importance of civil rights advocacy. He worked closely on developing arguments with John Payton, a leading civil rights lawyer, until his untimely death just last year. In '82, the Supreme Court, in a decision written by Justice Stevens, overturned the appellate court, literally saving the NAACP from fiscal extinction. Jim went on to serve with distinction as a U.S. District Court judge for the District of Columbia for more than 15 years. And he retired just 3 years ago in June of 2010. Our dear friend Bill Robinson said it best: Jim is a self-effacing guy. He is an unsung hero of the movement. I'm going to end with a quote from a wonderful letter written by retired Mississippi State Supreme Court Justice and dear friend of Jim's, Justice Jimmy Robertson, who wrote in this beautiful letter to Jim, and I quote, "We should leave this day determined to find ways to enable the generation now bearing the torch that some selflessness is good for the soul, that each generation past and present has had no choice but to wager its salvation upon some prophecy based on imperfect knowledge, not only following Holmes and sounding a note of daring hope and will, but acting out that note, ever aware of the practical reality that opportunity is not a frequent visitor." As he concluded in his letter, "I'd hoped to be with you today. Alas, a brief Jew, in a particular, this is my own aside, a wonderful Mississippi phrase, Jimmy Robinson says, but due to a client whose ox is in the ditch, with apologies to the poets, I send this greeting, and my son Lamar, who's my surrogate." I think Lamar is in the audience, and there he is. And this letter concludes, "Jim, thank you for your kindness and your service and for lighting the way. I bring you our honoree, retired Judge Jim Robertson."
Nobody's done all rise for me in 3 years. I kind of like that. Thank you, Judy, for the lovely introduction and for the idea, because I understand it was your idea that I should be given this honor. Special thanks to Pauline Schneider and Jamie Gorelick and Arlene Holt-Baker, who co-chaired the host committee to this event. Thanks to the family of the late Judge Louis Oberdorfer and the Lichtman team, Elliot and Judy, who introduced us to Mississippi and without whom I would not be here today. And thanks to the many friends who have made the effort to be here and have opened their wallets for the Mississippi Center for Justice. When Judy wrote to me and asked if I would accept this honor, I said yes quickly before she changed her mind. But then I set two conditions for myself. First, because I had not set foot in Mississippi for years, I resolved to go to Jackson and pay a visit. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And second, I appointed myself a surrogate for the dozens of lawyers who went to Mississippi in the 1960s, all of whom deserve to be honored as forebears of what is now the Mississippi Center for Justice. By the time I first arrived in Jackson in March 1969, the earliest and bravest of those lawyers had already secured the beachhead and moved on. Al Bronstein to Plaquemines Parish and on to the ACLU prison project. Marion Wright to Washington, to the Children's Defense Fund, and to Peter Edelman. Elliot Lichtman to work for Joe Rao. Lackey Rowe, I think, to the ministry. But Reuben Anderson, Fred Banks, and Mel Leventhal were hard at work in Jackson. Right across Ferris Street at the Inc. Fund. If you don't know what the Inc. Fund is, that's the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Inc. Armand Durfner and Jim Lewis were up the street at LCDC, which is the Lawyers Constitutional Defense Committee of the Roger Baldwin Fund of the American Civil Liberties Union. And at the Lawyers Committee, or the President's Committee as it was then known in Mississippi, were Larry Ashenbrenner, the passionate Larry Ashenbrenner, Martha Wood, who became city counsel to Charles Evers and is now a judge in Chicago, Bob Fitzpatrick, who taught me how to pick a jury, Larry Ross, who is here from New Jersey. Larry had to shave his mustache for Judge Marshall Perry. And of course, the Lawyers Committee's voting rights genius, Frank Parker. Up in Oxford, with North Mississippi Rural Legal Services, were Mike Trister, John Britton, and others. Later came Roy Haber and Tex Wilson and Peach Taylor, and the amazing Constance Iona Slaughter. I accept this honor on behalf of all those people and more, not to mention the many volunteers who served shorter but just as intense tours of duty, like Dan Singer, who was there with Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney. The Lawyers Committee shut down the Jackson office sometime in the late 70s or early 80s. I was a board member then, and I voted with the majority. It was an unhappy decision, but a necessary one. Our Ford Foundation support had dried up. The office seemed to have lost its steam. The mission was no longer clear. And that's why I decided I had to go back to Jackson to find out what the MCJ is up to and why it has succeeded so dramatically when only a short time ago we closed our doors, struck our tents, left town. What I discovered was a simple truth, that the Lawyers Committee's old litigation model had become obsolete, or at least that it had outlived its usefulness. In its first incarnation in Mississippi, the Lawyers Committee was all about litigation. The subject we most often discussed was impact litigation, how we're going to find the deep pockets, how to find the levers that would make the biggest change. Litigation was our hammer, and to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. We thought we could change the world with class actions and injunctions and declaratory judgments and big money damage awards. We couldn't, and we didn't. To consider one example, and it's already been mentioned, was our suit to deny tax-exempt status to the private schools, the so-called SEG academies that popped up all over the state in the wake of school desegregation. It was, if I do say so myself, a brilliantly conceived and executed piece of litigation. But I'm not sure it changed anything. If the rule established by that case has any viability today, of course, the exempt organizations branch at the IRS would be afraid to enforce it. Martha Bergmark and her remarkable young staff in Jackson and Biloxi and Indianola have a litigation hammer, but it's only one of the tools in their toolkit. They understand much more profoundly than we did that court decisions are only a piece of the mosaic of social change. They introduced me to a book that I can't recommend to you enough. I'd never heard of it before, but their young people all know it, a book by Gerald Rosenberg called The Hollow Hope. That book is dry and scholarly, but it effectively challenges our assumptions about the importance of litigation and even of Supreme Court decisions in bringing about social change. You know, they actually teach law students today that court decisions aren't all that important. Sounds like heresy. But at least to my ears, it has the ring of truth. Today's Mississippi justice advocates can litigate if they have to, and that capability brings credibility, but they are also lobbyists, teachers, activists, organizers, brokers, conveners. I was going to give you a couple of examples, but you've already heard about them. I'll touch very, very briefly about them. After Hurricane Katrina, Mississippi decided to use federal grant money for purposes unrelated to disaster relief for poor folks who had lost their houses. They filed suit in a federal court in Washington, and some district judge threw their case out. Stop that. But MCJ staff Button Holey, a HUD assistant secretary, showed her the problem, negotiated a solution that has restored more than, I think, $132 million to its intended purpose of rebuilding housing for more than 5,000 low-income families. And they got there a lot faster than if they'd won their lawsuit and had to go through an appeal. And then when the Mississippi legislature failed to enact laws to curb the obscene excesses of the payday lending industry, MCJ organized and is now rolling out this new Roots Credit Partnership, which is stunning and a real breakthrough. Mississippi Center for Justice is, as Martha puts it, homemade and homegrown. And that, of course, is part of the reason that it's done better than we carpetbaggers did when we were in Mississippi. But also, especially with the new Roots Credit Partnership, in its own words, the center is moving into groundbreaking territory for a social change organization, looking ahead to create a new paradigm by engaging non-traditional partners in the business and financial world. It's very exciting. The MCJ is the real deal. I am delighted to have been brought back into the fold. Thank you all very much. I have to tell you what this says. It says, with heartfelt thanks to James Robertson for your lifetime commitment to the pursuit of justice for all. And there's some beautiful photographs. Thank you so much.
And finally, as we celebrate our big birthday, number 10, I want to call to the podium Barbara Arnwine, President of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Not only is the Lawyers Committee our national affiliate, but they are celebrating their 50th anniversary. So 2013 is a big year for birthdays. Barbara, by honoring Judge Robertson tonight, one of the Lawyers Committee's heroes, we acknowledge that Isaac Newton influence. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and you are one of those giants. The Lawyers Committee is responsible for way more giants than could possibly be imagined, and you're one of them. So thanks for being here.
Very kind. Thank you. Very kind.
And I know I've done this in receptions before, but it honestly can't be done enough. We are immensely grateful for all the support and partnership that the Lawyers Committee has provided over the years. But I want to cite the singular example of the partnership we forged in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. Without the Lawyers Committee, we could not have built the pro bono delivery system and the whole system we have of utilizing volunteers effectively. And the Lawyers Committee made that possible. So we thank you for that as well as all else. And we're going to exchange some anniversary goodies here, so I'm going to turn it over to Barbara. But it's a treat to be able to honor you tonight and to say happy 50th.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Martha. I want everybody to know we did not coordinate our colors.
But we did.
Here we go again. But it's just, I want to say, a really strong, first of all, congratulations, Jim Robertson. Yeah. You are just a hero and have been wonderful, and I really want to commend you so much. And how do you say happy 10th anniversary to the Mississippi Center for Justice? Yes! It's fantastic. I am so excited. It is so fortuitous. Just think about it. During the very summer that we were so enthusiastically celebrating your becoming the new Deep South affiliate of the Lawyers Committee in 2005, and John Britton, or JB as they like to say, was there with us, and we were all, working through documents. Who would have thought that as we celebrated that new partnership, that all of a sudden the winds of Katrina, the water of Katrina, would bring such a disaster to the Mississippi Bay Area, and that it would cause so many hardships. Yet we were put to the test, and I think everybody in here will agree on one thing: we passed that test with flying colors. We forged a very real and working and lasting partnership to advance racial and economic justice. It has been so rewarding to all of us at the Lawyers Committee, board and staff alike, and I know that in the audience is a lot of the staff of the Lawyers Committee. Could you please take a moment and just stand so everybody could see? And yes, and all our alumni and everybody else, and there's so many. We are so proud of you. So we hope as we go forward, we look forward to watching the Mississippi Center for Justice continue to grow, to continue to strive, and we will be there walking with you every step of the way. Happy 10th anniversary.
That's right.
Yes.
All right. Let's exchange in these. We each get one. Oh.
Thank you so much. This is fun. Cool. Yes. Okay. As you get ready to go home tonight, I want to remind you that in your chairs you found a brochure for this year's Great Mississippi Road Trip. It's going to be October 10th through the 13th. As a seasoned veteran of this trip myself, I urge you to put it on your calendars. If you've never done it, you've got to do it. There's certain experiences in this world that you must share in, and this is one of them.
They're out front, I'm told.
Yes, oh, they're out front. Thank you. So if you'll get them out front, we urge you to put those dates on your calendar, send in your registrations immediately. This reception is certainly a convenient way to get a taste of what the Mississippi Center for Justice is all about. But like Jim just told you, there's nothing like going to Mississippi itself. And Mississippi tells its own story. So this event just can't hold a candle to what that's going to be like. So we want to make sure that you all come. We look forward to seeing you there. Good night. Thank you so much. What a great, great night and honor.